This is a little bit weird for me, I have to admit, because usually I get up here and I talk to you about the latest superfood smoothie recipe or the peptide for a perfect tan or which of the 11 trillion forms of magnesium works best for constipation. But today we're going to talk about something different, something important, like Warren said, and something that is a serious issue that all of us, starting tonight, can work together to help to fix in our community. Now, looking at that slide, increased risk of death by 25%, not protected by your demographics, horrific for cardiovascular muscle, increased cancer risk, pain, fatigue, depression, cortisol, high blood pressure, high inflammation, a weakened immune system, and physicians are not even trained to treat this condition. What do you think that this is? COVID? Someone say COVID? Seed oils? Being a Democrat in the USA in November last year? Some of you are on the right track, but before we get to what exactly this issue is, I want to show you a photo that's a little bit weird. I took this photo right after Tim had reached out to me, letting me know what the theme of this year's conference was going to be, tribe and togetherness. And I took this photo while sitting on the floor of my hotel room in India a few months ago. And this is how I eat lunch a lot of the time, all right? By myself, in a hotel room, cheating with a Diet Coke. Aspartame just gets converted into like phenylalanine and aspartic acid, and you gotta drink like 77 cans to get the carcinogenic risk of actual aspartame. So shoot me, I'm drinking Diet Coke, little chicken tikka masala, some naan, some yogurt, and I'm sitting there, as I often do, eating a fantastic meal, all by myself, a little bit lonely. Great workout in the hotel room that morning, yet despite that, I was lonely. Watched a cool movie on Netflix the night before, subtitled in English language. Despite that fact, I was lonely. After stepping off stage, speaking to 400 entrepreneurs that evening and going back to my hotel room, I was lonely. Sleeping in a very nice fancy hotel room suite with all the bells and whistles, that didn't seem to fix it either, still lonely. As a matter of fact, I have achieved some success in life. I started a business, I make okay money, I figured out the whole six-pack abs thing, I even decoded the perfect, amazing organic coffee enema. And yet I still struggle with the same thing that a lot of other people struggle with these days in a paradoxically hyperconnected society, loneliness. How many of you in here have ever had that feeling? Even with your people that you're around, that you're sometimes by yourself. As a matter of fact, US Surgeon General in 2023, Dr. Vivek Murthy, identified loneliness as the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Please do not use this as an excuse to get a bunch of friends and take up chain smoking. But it highlights how dangerous this can actually be in addition to all the other issues that I already showed you on that first slide. This area of the brain lit up right there in a slightly highlighted color that you may be able to see is an area called, any Andrew Huberman listeners in here? You'd probably know if you were. It's the anterior cingulate cortex. The anterior cingulate cortex registered physical pain. And when you are in a state of social deprivation, that same area of your brain lights up. You register the same responses to loneliness as you do to physical pain. When you look at Tylenol, AKA acetaminophen, when someone is administered a drug like that, it actually acts on the same neural responses that are created when we are in lonely or socially isolated scenarios. As a matter of fact, in the world's longest study on longevity, run at Harvard, started in 1938, followed hundreds of men for over 80 years. After isolating for all confounding variables, what do you think was the one single factor associated with living a long and happy life? Shilajit, you're right, it was Shilajit. It was relationships, it was community, This almost seems to be woven into our very DNA. This here is an artistic image of Adam and Eve being banished from the Garden of Eden. The original man, original woman, kicked out of a community. If you look at ancient Greek cultures, they used to use these little pottery shards called ostraka, on which they would write the name of a person who they wished to banish for 10 years from society, and that pottery shard is from where we derive our word ostracism. In organized religion, we come across this concept of excommunication, one of the most horrible punishments that you can receive, usually for some kind of an awful sin, excommunicare. Excommunication, being cut off from communicating with your other fellow human beings, is a form of punishment because we know how severe that punishment can be. The word ban, right? We shadow ban seed oils and people. We ban artificial colors and flavorings. Ban comes from a French word, bannir, meaning to cast out, to send away. And somewhere deep inside our DNA is a built-in physiological reaction to this that is very painful and very sickening. Who knows what the number 150 stands for? Any guesses? You guys heard that number before? The number of minutes you should spend each week in a hyperbaric chamber? Grams of protein per day? Dunbar's number. Dunbar's number. Right, so Robert Dunbar was an anthropologist who figured out that most people operate very well in a certain community, about 5 intimate friends or family members, about 15 people who are pretty close friends, about 50 additional people in your community, and then a few dozen other people who are within your circles. And once we are cast out from any of those circles, or when we do not have enough interaction with the 5, the 15, the 50, or the dozens, there is something inside of us, this deep ancestral or evolutionary mechanism that kicks in that essentially makes us freak out. Heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, cortisol increases. As a matter of fact, when you are alone, there are even transcriptomic changes to your genetic pathways that cause an upregulation of genes responsible for inflammation and a downregulation of genes responsible for antiviral activity, meaning that when you are by yourself, nature almost wants to kill you off. This might have served you very well in ancient times when being banished or excommunicated or ostracized from the village would have left you alone out in the jungle with a saber-toothed tiger. But nowadays, it has led to what researchers call the paradox of loneliness. The paradox of loneliness. What this means is that when you are by yourself, all these physiological mechanisms that kick in on blood pressure, on heart rate variability, on hormonal profiles, on genetics, they cause you to become irritable, they cause you to become depressed, they cause you to become anxious, and they cause you to become the type of person that other people do not want to be around, thus creating this vicious cycle of more loneliness. So it's a real problem. And what is not making it any better is the increased prevalence of what probably every single one of you have in your pockets right now, smartphone usage. As a matter of fact, there is a direct correlation between many of the same health factors associated with loneliness and the prevalence of smartphone usage. I don't know if any of you in here fall into the same category as me. Probably some of you do, but I can remember a day when I did not have a smartphone. I think I got my first smartphone in 2013. So I remember the day when there was the long, curly cable extended to the receiver that you had to hold up against your head like this while you flipped through a 20-pound book full of numbers to find what you wanted to call, and it was almost like a workout to make a phone call. And sometimes I'm a little bit nostalgic for those days, until I remember about Google Maps. But the idea here is that there is a generation who does not remember those days, and that generation, also known as iGen or Gen Z, is, according to an article that I recently read in the Atlantic magazine, on the brink of being close to the worst mental health crisis in decades, and much of this deterioration is traced to their cell phones. You'd think that by being connected to a whole bunch of people, 5,000 Facebook friends, fans, followers, and likes galore on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and all the social media mechanisms that we use, that we would be hyper-connected and we would be less lonely. But there are 2 different kinds of loneliness that you need to know about. There is objective loneliness. actually being lonely, actually being by yourself, and not a lot of people, except the freaky health nut who lives on the pristine Himalayan mountaintop drinking deuterium-depleted water, fall into the category of. Many of us fall into the category of subjective loneliness. Subjective loneliness is looking around you or looking on social media, perceiving how many friends and followers and likes and connections that all the people who you're viewing have, comparing yourself to that and realizing that you're not as popular as they are. And can you imagine for iGen, Gen Z, for teenagers, and for adolescents, how much worse before the ego or the identity is fully formed that issue becomes? A great deal of subjective loneliness is leading to this crisis. Now, one of the questions here is, can we actually form a personal relationship through an impersonal medium like this? Now, there's a great author named Sherry Turkle. She wrote a book called Reclaiming Conversation. And in that book, she describes how when you're interacting with someone digitally, you miss out on two things. You miss out on a prefix and you miss out on an actual flesh and blood relationship. Many of you know this if you've gotten the emoji that says hi period instead of hi exclamation mark, and you wonder, why did they say hi period? Are they upset with me? Are they not excited about what I just said? Do they not want to see me? Or controversially, why did they say hi exclamation mark? They're in my face, they're too excited. It's too early in the morning for the hi exclamation mark. We miss out on so much when we don't have the prefix and the relationship and the communication occurs digitally. This is not a new phenomenon. This was actually described in the year 2000 in a book called Bowling Alone. I know there's a lot of bowling enthusiasts in the audience right now. I see a lot of morphed right or left singular arms. Bowling Alone is this idea that bowling went from being a highly community-based activity to being an activity that you often, as the name implies, do alone. And in the book, Putman describes how there is a reduction in all forms of in-person social intercourse upon which Americans used to found the fabric of their social lives. He blamed television work, double career, urban sprawl, and commuting, and this was even before the advent of the phone. So just imagine how much worse it is now. It's very, very easy now to not have a tribe, to not have a community, to not have analog flesh and blood relationships. One of the things that's interesting about this idea of impersonal versus personal relationships comes down to a little bit of science. You guys mind if I get a little bit nerdy with you? There are these things on your skin called Pacinian corpuscles. They sound like something someone would order from a bakery case at like a New York restaurant. Like, I'll have the Pacinian corpuscle, please, with the side of spirulina. Pacinian corpuscles, though, no, actually what they are is when you are touched, when you shake hands, when you hug, when you massage, when you have physical touch encounters with another human being, those Pacinian corpuscles directly communicate to your vagus nerve. When they communicate to your vagus nerve, you have an increase in heart rate variability, you have a drop in heart rate, you have a drop in blood pressure, and furthermore, you have a rise in a hormone called oxytocin. Do you guys know what oxytocin is? The love hormone, the bonding hormone, the trust hormone, the hormone that some people are huffing intranasally with ketamine to connect better with other individuals. But it works better to shake hands or hug or massage, trust me. Oxytocin is something that is released in huge amounts, and when oxytocin is released, we subsequently get a rise in serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter that people take things like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRI medications, to be able to get more of, to stick around between the cell surface receptors or in the synaptic clefts. So this idea of pure human touch is something we do not experience when we are in a digital relationship. Now, in addition to that, we also have pheromones. A lot of you are probably familiar with a fascinating concept in science nowadays. Basically says that women who are on the birth control pill sometimes choose the incorrect partner. I think a lot of scientists and doctors in the health space have talked about this, and there's actually some truth behind that. We all produce pheromones that, for better or worse, attract us or repel us from the opposite sex. And when a woman is ovulating, the pheromone androstenone that a man creates is something that she's normally disgusted by but attracted to when going through a period of ovulation. A man, on the other hand, is attracted to a different pheromone called copulins that the woman produces when she is ovulating. And so there are sexual attractiveness signals that bring a man and a woman together. And if a woman is attracted to a man who is producing a different type of androstenone when she is not ovulating, or when she's ovulating, the immune system of that man is more similar to the immune system of the woman, and so they can wind up having a child with a less robust immune system. So again, it's like this smart ancestral built-in mechanism for humans to have stronger immune systems based on pheromone attractiveness. And last I checked, Tinder and OnlyFans and any of these other places that we go digitally to interact with the opposite sex do not have a pheromone button. Then finally, there are electromagnetic signals. Everybody in here, and this is based on fascinating research from the Heart Math Institute, produces an electromagnetic signal, not only from your heart, but also from your brain that emanates 3 to 15 feet outside of you. I don't know if anybody saw the biochargers out there on the expo floor, but you are all almost like a mini biocharger, and other human beings can pick up your electromagnetic signal. And furthermore, and an example of all of us dancing in here in this room about 20 minutes ago is a perfect example of this. When the energy or the frequency or the electromagnetic signal of a whole bunch of people in the same room become aligned, everybody feels good and everybody feels happier if that's a good signal. And when a whole bunch of depressed, low energy, vampires are in a room together, that brings the energy down. But do we get touching Pacinian corpuscles, oxytocin, serotonin, electromagnetic signals, or pheromones when we are interacting digitally? Not really. Not until Elon invents that technology. And this is not making it any better, right? Being able to have a creepy Joaquin Phoenix mustache and interact with a digital girlfriend assistant. We now have Grok sexy mode and combative mode and every other mode that makes it even easier to talk to your phone like it's a little girlfriend or boyfriend or assistant in your pocket. And now you even have to, if you're not careful, kiss Elon Musk. So we live in a society where a lot of this is just rapidly changing and contributing to this ever-increasing ancestral problem of loneliness. And I don't want to get too morbid here, but I read this book, I'd Like You More If You Were More Like Me, by John Ortberg. He's a fantastic author. And he says this in his book. I'm going to read this to you. When it comes to social isolation and loneliness, it really isn't about getting more friends on Facebook. It isn't about extending your Snapchat streak of chats by yet another week. It isn't about that pop-up you have set on your computer to reach out via email to some influencer on your digital Rolodex. It isn't about developing the independent lone wolf, I plus my smartphone can survive on my own, thank you very much mentality. And this is what I say in my book, Fit Soul. It's about going out of your way to build physical flesh and blood relationships and a robust community of people who will come to your rescue when your basement floods, who will show up at your doorstep when you're moving into a new house, and who will cry at your funeral. Probably have 4,888 Facebook friends who may not cry at your funeral because they've never even met you in person before. Has anybody come across Bonnie Rare, the palliative care practitioner, wrote a viral article on the internet and then followed it up with this book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying? And do you know what the 5 regrets of the dying actually are? I wish I'd worked less. I wish I'd chosen to show my true emotions more. I wish I'd chosen to be happier. I wish I'd been my true authentic self instead of who I thought the world expected me to be. And what's the 5th? I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. Think about that. Elementary school, high school, college, previous jobs you've had. How many friends are you totally disconnected from now? Because it's so easy to move on. It's so easy to discard them. It's so easy now to replace them digitally. Another great book, Transcend, The New Science of Self-Actualization by Scott Kaufman, describes what this produces pretty prolifically. No human being is exempt from the dire consequences of loneliness, and no other basic human need satisfaction can substitute for a deep connection. Not money, fame, power, popularity, belonging, and acceptance, even though we seek these for the false hope that they will fully satisfy our need for connection. Not all the hyperbaric chambers or red light therapy beds or beef jerky coffee mixes or colostrum facials on the face of the planet will replace real flesh and blood community. Like Warren said when I came up here, it is the most important biohack. And this is why, and I've said this from stage before, I think I said it last year, we see 110-year-old cigarette-smoking, gin-chugging great-grandmas in Sardinia, Italy, who are living a long and happy life despite never putting a laser light into their ear orifice or climbing into a hyperbaric chamber. The blue zones, despite some of the controversy around the birth record data and maybe some of the vegan propaganda behind them, actually highlight originally 6 key factors that led to a long and happy life. There was less smoking, high amounts of physical activity, a diet rich in plants and herbs and spices, a diet rich in legumes, which me not being much of a refried bean fan can't get super behind, but it's in there. What were the 5th and the 6th? The original Blue Zone studies, the 5th and 6th were family and friends. Family and friends, your relationships. Again, I'll remind you of the effects of real human interaction, the pheromones, the oxytocin, the sensory receptors, all of those things that they're getting quite a bit of in the blue zones that we aren't experiencing as much of now. Now, Warren said I might be shirtless. It turns out I actually am. I forgot about this. That's me as a kid, probably 12 years old, of course with my shirt off. You guys, I was and I am still pretty introverted, but I was really introverted growing up. I was a total recluse. My mom and dad used to joke with me when I got older about how they literally had to coax me out of my bedroom with threat of punishment because I would refuse to come out when we had friends over and like look them in the eye and say hello and shake their hand before I just slip back away into my bedroom to be all by myself. Even now, I'm pretty happy laying in a hyperbaric chamber, sucking on a bee propolis lollipop, listening to binaural beats, all by myself. Many of us who seek our health fall into this same potentially selfish scenario, right? I just grew up as this introverted kid, homeschooled K through 12 in North Idaho. And honestly, you gotta remember I was homeschooled, so to me, this wasn't as silly as it seems now when I say it, but I thought that in order to make friends and have relationships with people, you had to have a common interest with them or there had to be something in it for you, right? It had to be transactional or highly relatable. And then I read this book. In 2014, I believe, I read this book, Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. Has anybody here read this? It's great. Fantastic read. One of the biggest takeaways that I got from that book was that in order to meet people, in order to form relationships, one of the best things that you can do when you walk into a room is walk in there and not say, what's in it for me, but what can I give to these people? Sit down at a table and using some of the techniques that I'll share with you shortly, identify who that person is, what they like, where they need help, and figure out where you can help them. Back in 2014 and 15, I was also outside of my small sector of personal training studios and gyms in Spokane, Washington, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, a relative unknown when it came to like getting on a stage like this to speak. I had no clue how to even do that besides a little bit of speech and debate in high school and a little bit of dabbling here and there. But I showed up after reading this book, the Ancestral Health Symposium, I think it was in Harvard that year, and I asked if I could help stuff bags as a volunteer. I spent 2 years volunteering, stuffing bags, walking around the expo, seeing how I could help. I knew that someday I wanted to be up there sharing and teaching because I love to do that. But after I read Keith's book, all I did was get out there and take risks and offer myself up to help people. And eventually I got invited to do a poster presentation. Yay! And then I got invited to get up on stage and introduce some speakers, which I thought was really cool. And then one year, I think this was 2016 or 17, I got invited to give a talk. And at that point, I was this weird, nerdy, introverted homeschool kid from North Idaho. But that's what got me down this path, is asking myself, how can I give to other people when I walk into a room? Not what's in it for me, but what's in it for them, and what can I offer with the gifts that I have? I'm gonna give you 6 tips to not be lonely. Just 6 things that I've learned from the trenches that I hope will help you out a little bit in getting out there and making more friends. The first is very interesting. There is fascinating research done that people are less lonely, even less lonely than the people they're actually helping and around when they serve and volunteer. A study just came out in January of 2025 showing that elderly people who volunteer have a direct and sudden drop in loneliness. The people that they are volunteering to help don't see that, but you see it in those people. There's something magical about serving other people. So how do we do this? My sons and I, for example, and you can Google this plus the name of your city, Meals on Wheels or meal delivery service. Every week we go to the food kitchen, we pile up a bunch of food in the car, we drive it around the city. We got about 8 different houses that we go to. We drop that food off. Yes, it has like seed oils and Frito-Lays and starch and sugar, but I kind of shut that part of my brain off. and I deliver meals. From a very early age in college, I would go out to all the local schools and volunteer and teach little science and math projects. When I was a kid, my parents used to drag me. I hated it. And then I wound up doing it with my kids later on as a father. They would bring me to the nursing homes to play my violin. And then I started going there when my kids were of age to play the guitar and sing songs. There are multiple places in your community where you can volunteer, where you can help, where you can serve. As a matter of fact, this book, and we actually have this out at the Life Network booth, is a book that I wrote called The Spiritual Disciplines Journal. Before you go to bed at night, you do self-examination. You ask yourself, what good have I done this day, and what could I have done better this day? You also ask yourself, what is one way that I lived out my life purpose on this day? So the evening is all purpose and self-examination, but the morning, you write down one thing that you are grateful for, and then this is the magic part, and this is the super relevant part to what we're talking about right now. Who is one person who I can pray for, help, or serve today? And it can't be like every single day, my mom, my mom, my mom, my mom, my mom. Think of somebody new every single day. And this stacks, 365 potentially new people every year. And yes, I know that sometimes they might not know if you're praying for them, but if you're picking up the phone and calling them or texting them or going out of your way to help them or serve them, it stacks up. You don't have to have a journal to do this, but systematically figuring out how you can serve or help people is a fantastic research-proven way to combat loneliness. Then there's this. Who here throws dinner parties? I used to kind of be embarrassed to throw dinner parties because I thought my house wasn't big enough and my table wasn't big enough and I didn't know how to cook meals. And I started when we had a very small house, and we've gradually built up over the years an older home in Spokane, Washington, and a newer home in Idaho where we have a big, long table and we throw these dinners every single month. I simply have an old school Google Doc with a whole bunch of people's names on it who I invite to dinner parties, and I mix and match it like a recipe. We even do Iron Chef nights. That's what this is a photo of, and this is super fun. You choose 2 people at the party who are gonna show up 4 hours early. You buy a mystery ingredient, you set it in the middle of the kitchen island or on the dining room table, you unveil the ingredient, and those 2 people get to cook an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert using the mystery ingredient that you unveiled, and it's super fun. I think last year we had chicken, and I had to figure out how to make chicken for dessert, and I found out this Turkish cinnamon vanilla pudding recipe for chicken pudding. It was very high in protein. It didn't taste half bad. It's kind of like chicken ice cream. But having themed dinners like this, we will do summer-themed dinners, we will do flower-themed dinners, we will do Valentine's-themed dinners, we will do everything except a vegan-themed dinner. And we love throwing these big, glorious family dinners. One of my friends, Jason Gaynard, he wrote a book called Mastermind Dinners. Great read. Now, what Jason does is he'll organize people in a different city. He says the magic number is 6 people so that everybody can get to know each other. It actually depends, not to get too nitty-gritty here, on the shape of the table. A round table, usually you can get more people, like 8 to 10 people, to sit around and have a group conversation together. Longer tables typically top out, like long rectangular tables top out at about 6 people. But dinners are a great way to bring people together, to entertain. People don't care about the size of your dining room or the size of your table. They just want to be with other real flesh and blood people, eating food, breaking bread together. As a matter of fact, do you guys know what the word companionship actually means? Anybody heard of the term pannier? It's bread. Companionship literally means breaking bread together. And I know there's probably a bunch of carnivore enthusiasts in here who are freaking out, asking, why don't they call it steakmanship? Or maybe if you're super woke, steak personship. But anyways, I digress. Companionship is something that's built around the table. We also are a huge fan of family games, because remember, with this Blue Zones data and with relationships in general, it doesn't always have to be friends, it can be family. Every evening at 7 p.m., our entire family gathers around the kitchen island. We sing a song together, we pray together, and then this is my favorite part, we bust out the games. We have a game closet that's like overflowing with literally hundreds of games. We play games nearly every night. As a matter of fact, so much that my sons and I right there are playing a game that they're launching on Kickstarter in a couple weeks. I made the mistake of giving them the book called Sun Tzu's Art of War as a reading assignment, and they came up with the idea for a card game called the Fart of War, because they're 17-year-old boys. But we play dinner games every single night as a family. It's a fantastic way to keep phones off the table, and as Sherry Turkle says in that book I mentioned earlier, and which I'll mention again here momentarily, reclaim real conversation. This can be a tough one. I don't want to tell you how many times since I read this book that I'm out at a restaurant and the waiter or the waitress comes up to me and picks up my phone from the floor under the chair and puts it on the table and says, "Sir, you dropped your phone." And I say, no, it was supposed to be down there, because research has shown, and a lot of you have probably seen this, that the mere presence of a phone on the table detracts from real conversation. The only time a phone is on the table in our house is when we were playing Scrabble, because I have the word checker app on my phone, and it's in airplane mode, but there are some pretty heated arguments that require one to have a phone at the table. Besides that, phones off the table, under the chair, in a purse, in a fanny pack. It's a really great way to reclaim conversation, but yet still, it can be difficult to actually know how to have a real conversation these days. People just aren't as good at small talk. How many of you in here find small talk a little bit awkward? Like maybe last night at dinner with somebody, or tonight when you're at the party, right? We ask questions like, let me give you an example. Does anybody know what a binary question is? Binary question? This is a question where the answer is yes or no. Yes or no. You having a good time today? Was the conference good for you? Do you like this meal? Oh, do you like chicken? So yes, no questions. They don't lead down much more of a route unless you're talking to a super chatty person than a yes or a no, and then you gotta figure out what you're gonna say next. Binary question is a yes or no. A polar question would be like, did you use seed oil or olive oil on that, bro? Or are you a ketchup or a mustard guy, right? And these kind of questions are close-ended versus the opposite type of question, which would be a what-ended question, an open-ended question. But it can be tough to actually figure out what an open-ended question actually looks like and begin to steer your conversation to do that. This image right here comes from a research study in which researchers, and this is fascinating, wanted to create 36 questions that led to love. And they took total strangers, they developed a list of 36 open-ended questions, and they actually determined whether or not these questions could lead people to become romantically attached to one another. Do not worry, I will not have you guys actually ask these questions to one another. I don't want to create any unintended marriages at Health Optimization Summit this year, but it's a fantastic example of how to ask the right questions. And then this book comes out. Sahil Bloom wrote the book, 5 Types of Wealth. This is new. Has anybody read this book? It's fantastic. He talks about time wealth, talks about financial wealth, talks about physical wealth. And one of the wealths that he talks about is relationship wealth, or what he calls social wealth. That part of the book alone is super fascinating if this stuff is interesting to you. But for example, look at the top 2 questions on that slide. How many of you ask somebody, where do you live? Or, and this one super irks me because it sounds like I'm a freaking alien or something, where are you based out of? But look at that. What's your favorite thing or your least favorite thing about your hometown? That seems like kind of an awkward, edgy way to start a conversation, but it leads to way more interesting conversations in where do you live or where are you based out of, right? What's the favorite thing about where you live? What's your name? They say their name. We got kind of a polar question, potentially, if that person is as bad at conversation as most of us are. Versus, what's the origin of your name? Or if you ask their name right away, say, that's interesting, what's that mean? Why the hell did your parents name you that? You get the idea. These are open-ended questions. I'm gonna give you one more tip, and then I'm going to cut you guys loose just real briefly before I finish to practice this for just a couple minutes with each other. See how many people leave the room in the next 60 seconds. You've got a chance right now. How many of you in here are familiar with Chris Voss's book and tactics and masterclass called The Art of Negotiation? He talks about labeling in there, and he talks about mirroring. Now, labeling or mirroring is basically repeating back to someone what they just said to you. And this is one of my favorite tactics when I'm a lazy conversationalist or I'm just having a really hard time making small talk. And I have done this literally for like 3 hours at a dinner party before when I've been kind of tired and fatigued, and it works perfectly. And people just open up and talk to you the entire time, having no clue that you're mirroring or labeling them the entire time. I'll give you an example. Rachel, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? Sounds like you're a big fan of eating nothing in the morning.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Happens a lot to you, eating nothing in the morning? You must like that. And you go on and on, repeat. Now, some people really suck at this. Like you'll say, for example, what's your morning routine like? Well, I fast, and I do some red light, and then I swing some kettlebells. Kettlebells. Don't just repeat the last thing that they actually said. You want to kind of be a little bit creative with this, but it's a fantastic way to create real, meaningful conversation. Now, what I want you guys to do is look around you right now in your general perimeter of 10 feet or less, identify someone who you may not have talked to much or who you don't know very well, who's maybe not your spouse or your family member, and I'm gonna give you guys 60 seconds to practice open-ended question, back and forth. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. How'd that go? It's a little bit of a pattern interrupt to actually catch yourself not asking a close-ended, a binary, or a polar question. It's a little bit tough because it's super easy to ask those type of questions. But once you begin to get used to this concept of open-ended question, sitting on an airplane is a great way to do it. Sitting out of the party tonight, another great way to do this. Mirroring, labeling, and avoiding a lot of these close-ended questions, it can lead to conversations that allow you to learn enough about that person to where you can then begin to master the art of figuring out what you can give to them and what you can help them with, coming full circle back to Keith Ferrazzi's book. Now, I got a couple other examples for you of ways to build community and relationships. This next one is shared experiences. You know, Tim Ferriss just interviewed recently on his podcast the guy who founded a new social network app that I really like. Kind of. One of the problems with it is there's only 125 people that live in the actual community that I live in, and nobody else has this app yet, and the app requires other people to have it to connect with them. But it's called Mozi, M-O-Z-I, and it allows you to say that you're gonna do something, go on a hike, hit a coffee shop, do a workout, swing some kettlebells, whatever, and anybody else who is connected to you on that app gets an alert and can see and has the opportunity to come and join you. This is actually kind of like what Twitter used to be back in the days. A lot of people were just communicating on what they were up to and sharing experiences together. Shared experiences are fantastic. You can golf or play pickleball or go on a hike or play pickleball or go to a mushroom plant foraging meetup or hit a wiffle ball with a paddle across a net. I'm a little biased towards pickleball, but you get the idea. There's a lot of different shared experiences that using technology you're able to jump into easily, which leads me to the last tip, and that would be to find a community. In the health world, this is super easy to do now, you guys. Gary Brecka has a community. Dave Asprey has a community. Brian Johnson has a community that people call a cult, but that I still think counts as a community. Out there on the expo floor, we have the Life Network. It's a community. What you need to look for in a community is the opportunity, however, so we don't come full circle back to the issue of an impersonal relationship through an impersonal medium, is some kind of flesh and blood opportunities that are baked into that community, some kind of analog, real interactions with real human people with pheromones and oxytocin and serotonin and electromagnetic signals who you get to actually interact with. At the Life Network, we're building out meetups and spaces and opportunities for you to share experiences with your other friends within that community, which is open to everybody. It's not a paid community. Anybody can join and anybody can be a part of it. We did a workout today at 11 a.m. We're gonna do another one tomorrow at the ungodly hour of 8 a.m., but we'll be out there. The idea is when you are creating a community, you have to think beyond Facebook, you have to think beyond Twitter, you have to think beyond LinkedIn, unless those are somehow providing you with analog relationships, and you instead need to figure out how you can take those digital interactions and turn them actually into real flesh and blood relationships. Because your brain knows, it senses when it's digital and it's not analog. One final thing. This is a little bit embarrassing because I have this as a quote. On my screensaver on my computer, I have quotes that pop up all throughout the day. So whenever my computer's been down for about 5 minutes, it just starts to feed me inspirational quotes. I pull them from a folder called Ben's Quotes. This one popped up a couple weeks ago when I was putting this presentation together. I have no freaking clue what book it came out of, because usually I'm like copying and pasting quotes in. But as you think about what you can do today to start to build a community, to start to build relationships, I want to read this to you. You can create the world you want to live in. You can question what it means to be a grown-up. You can make one new friend anytime you go anywhere. You can hug more and hug longer. as long as the other person's okay with that. You can make gratitude not checking Instagram your evening ritual. You can become a correspondence queen. You can become, I love this, a sheriff of good times. You can be less flaky. You can sneak a card into your friend's bag when they leave your house. You can listen to a full Radiohead album with someone you love. You can be a person who isn't afraid to get vulnerable and emotional around other people in your life. You can knock on the door of an older neighbor and see if they want someone to talk to. You can, as the song that I came up here to says, get by with a little help from your friends. And I would challenge all of you to leave here today thinking about that very thing. Relationships, community, friends, handshakes, hugs, eye contact. I'm gonna be heading out right after this presentation to the Life Network booth to sign books, to shake your hand. I wanna get to know all of you a little bit better. Tonight, at dinner or at the party, I know we'll all be probably drinking some kind of funky alcohol-free mocktail made with chlorella that isn't quite as socially lubricating as the real thing. And yet, despite that, perhaps you can sneak a little tequila in. Let's all focus on branching out, maybe not sitting with all of the peers and the usuals that we usually sit with, but instead getting out, meeting other people, trying open-ended questions, non-binary, non-polar questions, seeing how you can help other people, and creating a community and a tribe, because that's why Tim brought us together at this event, is to reinitiate tribe, community, relationships, and togetherness in a lonely world. Are you guys with me with that? All right. Thank you. You're amazing. Your dance moves are incredible. I'll be around all weekend. Thank you so much for coming. I love you guys.